Well, welcome back, baseball fans, to the 1970-73 carryover league for 2022. Again, we're looking at the Keep, Waive, Retire, Part 2. We'd gotten through the first 8 teams the first time around, and we want to show you what teams have done since. We got from all the way down to Team 20, which is all the teams that didn't make the playoffs. Not all are completely set up, but most have 4 keepers now. So let's get started. We left off with the Atlanta Braves at 30302. So they needed to get a keeper and get rid of a waiver guy. So let's look at what it used to look like in Atlanta and see what the change was. And here with Atlanta, you see here's the 30302. They only have 3 keepers. And one of the things you noticed about Atlanta is, boy, they don't have any left-handed batters. They had Ralph Garr, Gale Hopkins, and Sonny Jackson from last year. And they're putting Sonny Jackson on waivers. So that seems like a logical candidate to find a spot at shortstop where Sonny Jackson played. So in the carousel, in the trade, we'll scroll up to where we left off, which was after this Milwaukee, Texas trade. And here it is, folks. The Angels move on from Maury Wills at shortstop, send him back to the National League, this time to the Atlanta Braves, for Sonny Jackson, who the Angels will put on waivers. So the Angels will collect a token in the trade because they're trading a starting shortstop. And he goes to the National League East to fill a hole in that Atlanta middle of the infield. So that helps the Braves out as they try and get back to the winning ways, as they still are probably the #1 rival to the New York Mets in this era, pressed into service in the same division, where it didn't really happen in regular baseball. They were in different divisions. So that satisfied Atlanta. When we look at the net for Atlanta now, they are at 40202. So from here to here, everybody has 4 keepers. They don't quite have the correct number of waives and retires, but those trades are usually inconsequential. A waiver guy for a retired guy. That's just for bookkeeping purposes to get us into the draft. Milwaukee is okay. They pass. But Ohio's the next team to make a move. Let's look at Ohio now. American League team. They started with a high number of guys forced in retirement, 4 of them. You see, 1, 2, 3, 4, with just 3 keepers. So the move that they made to get a keeper and unload some retired guys is that they traded with Baltimore and got a left-handed hitting catcher with power, Elrod Hendricks, and for a retired player. Baltimore gets a token for this, which is highly surprising since Hendricks doesn't hit much. But because Hendricks will continue to be a left-handed hitting catcher with power and decent defense, Baltimore didn't need him really, and they can find somebody else to fill that spot. So that puts Ohio's math now, after the transaction, to 40202, as they ended up making another trade later on for a retired player. All right, Arizona started at 20402. Let's get to them, and then that in the National League Mountain. They only had Popovich at short and Chuck Dobson as a starter, bunch of waiver guys and some retired guys. So they acquired early on in the previous video. They acquired Darryl Knowles, nice lefty reliever. And now, Arizona, they pick up Ken Tatum. Look at this. Now you're thinking, Ken Tatum was an all-star for the Angels. Well, he only has 1 year left. That's any good. So California got 3 great years out of him, and now they're selling him high because they're going to get a token for him. And they get Phil Reagan in return, who they'll put on waivers. So what Arizona's doing is being progressive knowing that this division is always up for grabs, and they just got themselves Daryl Knowles and Ken Tatum to finish games. So that means that Arizona now has a good chance to. We saw Colorado, we've seen Las Vegas and Portland do well. Now it's about Arizona's time, you would think. All right, the next team making amends here, the Expos. Minor deal, I believe, just to swap. Let's see what the Expos did. Yeah, they just moved Coco LeBoy to the Ohio player. This is an interdivision trade to balance both the books. The Expos had to acquire a retired player. They get Klimchak, and Coco LeBoy, a Waive player, goes to Ohio. This is just bookkeeping, no tokens involved. All right, next team, the Cardinals. And this is a nice move here. They start with too many keepers, 50102. Let's see what those keepers were to start this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know about Brock. We know about Julian Javier. We know about Rick Wise and Chuck Taylor. But Ken Holtzman is the trade chip, and they pull the plug with the Oakland A's. So it's an unusual way for Ken Holtzman to end up in Oakland, but here's the transaction. The Cardinals send Ken Holtzman, a keeper, active player Rick Alston, a lefty reliever with an ERA of around 4, to the A's. The A's would send back Danny Combs, a really decent lefty starter, can be the number 3 starter for the Cardinals, where they would plug him in a Holtzman spot, put him down to the 3 spot, and move Rick Wise to the 2 hole, and a retired player, plus a token. So what the Cardinals are saying in this deal was, we don't really need Ken Holtzman because you got Bob Gibson and we have Rick Wise. And so Danny Combs is much better than this Rick Alston guy. And they get a token. So that's why that is the motivation for St. Louis in the trade. And that gets the Cardinals to 40103. All right, Florida started and stayed at 40202. All right, the deal in White Sox, and you're going to see some blockbusters here, folks. They started this with just 2 keepers. Now, let's go take a look at the White Sox pre. They're trying to make a move, too. They're in a winnable division, that American League South. They only had Carlos May and Bob Humphries as keepers and a whole bunch of retired guys. So they were going to have to throw some tokens into trades. So let's look at the first trade they made of 2. That's the next one. Yep, it's the Dick Allen trade. And the Phillies like this trade too. They feel like they got over on this one. But we'll see when all is said and done. The Phillies send the keeper, probably the best keeper in the draft, Dick Allen, who will be the 1972 MVP for the White Sox. They send him and Dick Selma, a very good reliever, to the White Sox, but the White Sox return Orlando Cepeda, who in 1970 hit 34 home runs and is a 2 at first base, to the Phillies. He's pretty much as good as Dick Allen for at least 1970, and a retired player, plus the Phillies get a token. Both teams are pretty happy with this, and that the Phillies knew that they were going to move on from Dick Allen, but Cepeda is a heck of a consolation prize for Dick Allen and a token. So that's a blockbuster move. And then Chicago will make one more move in this round. Let's look at the next team, though. Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh had to get rid of a keeper, and it was Matty Alou. We'll just go right to the transaction for them. They needed to find a home for Matty Alou. And Seattle needs all the help with that. Their offense is struggling. So they traded for Matty Alou, swap of retired outfielders. And one of the things Pittsburgh wanted to do was unload Julio Navarro. He's that pitcher who gives up all the homers to lefties. And it worked good enough in 1 year, but they don't want to try it again. So Julio Navarro is now property of the Seattle Mariners. And the Pirates also get a token on losing out on Matty Alou. Alou's got really one really good year as a starter left. Then he turns into a pinch hitter. So Pittsburgh, again, is selling high. Again, a lot of these teams are selling high now. Dick Allen bounced around, and instead of bouncing to the Cardinals and the Dodgers, he bounces straight to the White Sox, and he becomes their MVP/problem moving forward, depending on how you look at that. All right, next team. is Seattle. Let's see, they picked up another guy in another trade. Seattle. They started with just Ulander and Woodson. And of course, they got Matty Alou, you just saw. They got somebody else. And I think in the next trade, yeah. Oh, that's what they did. So they traded another quality lefty reliever, Marcelino Lopez, for a lousy lefty reliever, Fred Norman, just to get Hoyt Wilhelm. No tokens were used in this trade, as Wilhelm only has 1 year left, and Seattle already lost a token in this trade. I didn't want to penalize Seattle 2 tokens for an expansion team. That's hard to do. Plus, their bullpen's taking a shot, losing Marcelino Lopez, retired Lou Marone, and Marcel Latchman. So they're picking up Julio Navarro, we talked about. They're picking up Fred Norman, who's not very good, but they're picking up Hoyt Wilhelm. The great Lou Marone finally retires. And this was actually Portland, excuse me, not Pittsburgh. Portland had those fellows, Fred Norman and Hoyt Wilhelm. Seattle and Portland like to make deals with each other. All right. Next transaction involved the Phillies. Well, we figured out what the Phillies did. They just made that one trade for Dick Allen and it fixed everything. All right, the next trade then was the Yankees. They have one more keeper. And they trade him, I must have skipped it, to the, I have to document this one. They traded Buddy Bradford to the White Sox, but I'll have to put that in there, for Don Young. That's a minor trade. Let's go to the next team. Portland had 6 keepers to start this round. Let's take a look at Portland again. Look at all their keepers. 6 keepers to start. That's too many. And they had to figure out which ones they would trade. We know about Wilhelm. They would move on from him. The other guy they moved, that side, the keeper they didn't want, is Ray Culp. So the trade that they moved on was they made a divisional trade. You don't see divisional trades very often. I try and avoid that. But they were willing to trade with Vegas because Vegas saw that Ray Culp was better than Jim Bunning and by an ERA of about a run. Bunnings will pitch in the rotation with an ERA of 4. Culp does it with an ERA of 3. But Portland steals a token from a division rival, and that was the motivation for Vegas to improve from Bunning to Culp. And we're getting to near the end, the Twins. The Twins just had to move some keepers, some waivered guys. Take a look at them. They had Joel Horland as a keeper, and then after the rest of the league didn't make an offer for Joel Horland, they said they put him on waivers. So they had 4 keepers and 4 waivers, so they had to trade waivers for retirees. And they did that with 2 more inconsequential moves. They traded Bob Aspromonte, an infielder, for Ruben Amaro, waiver for retire with Baltimore. And then they traded right-handed pitchers, Earl Wilson for Dave Baldwin. No tokens involved when you don't get a green active player or a blue keeper. So no tokens involved there. And that takes us to the end of the top 20 teams. And we still have more accounting to do. And when we plug in the current set of numbers, we started at 131, 64, 61. We're down to 130, 66, 60. So we still have to get to 128, 64, 64. Actually, yeah, that should be pretty easy because you need to push 4 more guys into retirement. This is where teams are going to start looking at their waive and keep guys and realize they're not that good and need to push them back into retirement. That's kind of what you want anyway, because if you have too many retired players, you're really in a big mess. Because there is no strat card to keep or put on waivers. So when we resume, we'll pick up with the last 12 teams, the teams 21 to 32 who all went to the playoffs last year. But this has been part 2, looking at keeper waiver retires, preparing for next year's draft, 2022. Thanks for checking out the video. We'll see you next time.